I got this comment to my stream read-through from the other day of the OFR product, and this comment says, "This product is a scam to make a few quick bucks off of people who don't know any better. Even more fully produced quote-unquote rules-lites are just a scam where the author takes advantage of the fact that you have played D&D to sell you a book of incomplete nonsense, knowing that you will automatically fill in the blanks with D&D rather than notice that you've been scammed." So there's a lot to unpack with this particular comment. First of all, scam is that's a really rough word. I'm gonna reserve that kind of word for something that is essentially, I don't know, criminally misrepresentative. Which certainly I don't think anything I've looked at has reached that point where I would say this is a scam. Is the, I guess, more than implication that rules-lite systems are scams, because really they're relying on your knowledge of things outside to fill in the gaps they're leaving. That really rules-lite is almost code for, we're gonna give you something incomplete, but you'll fill it in with other stuff you know, and therefore we're presenting this illusion that we're giving you a complete product when the reality is we're not. But there's a lot of gaps, but since you're gonna fill them in, doesn't matter. I think this is also a bit harsh, but it does lead me to an interesting discussion where I'm gonna spend a minute talking about my process, which is very informal and ad hoc, and then maybe how I can do things a little bit differently. And of course, I want to hear feedback from you folks. Let me give you my original thoughts, and then we'll go from there. My process, and I've mentioned this in different areas, but I don't think I've ever specifically created a video about it, is I see something I like, or somebody shoots me an email, message, something about, hey, you should check this out. Sometimes an author, creator, publisher will reach out to me directly and say, hey, I think you'd really like this thing, or we think your audience would really like this thing. And then I go through a process when I try to get a hold of the thing, or I buy it with my own money, or if it's something on drive-through, and thanks to patrons, folks use my drive-through links, or sometimes I'll reach out to the author or the creator or the publisher, or if they reached out to me, and I'll get a hold of this product. And then I'll do what I do, which is I don't tend to look at it until I start the stream. I'll pull out the product and we'll go through it, and the usual yada yada yada. I really don't get products that I don't like. And this is kind of by design. I'm not the channel where I'm trying to do a lot of negative reviews on things. At some point it might be fun to look at some things that maybe got really bad reviews and do a little bit of analysis, or can we save it, or something of that issue. But I don't go looking for products that I'm not gonna like. And I think folks are pretty good about, especially with the amount of videos I have and my footprint here in terms of content, of understanding the kind of stuff that I'm into and the kind of stuff that I like and that you folks tend to like, that no one's sending me things that are a really poor fit. Because of that, I tend to be kind of favorable. I tend to be positive on the things that I'm getting, because they're usually things that I'm interested in. I do think maybe I could do a better job of not necessarily tempering my enthusiasm, but in maybe trying to squint a little bit and putting a more critical eye on things. I think that I do this already, but maybe I could do it in a more structured way. Usually, because these are things I like, at the end of a stream I'm looking at, I'm fired up and excited about what I've read. It's almost like catching me in a little bit of an afterglow. I'm in a honeymoon period with the content in which I'm, yeah, rah, rah, let's go, let's do this. It might even be interesting to go back and look at things afterwards and see if they still live up to the promises that I thought they had when I first read them. Or if I thought that this is a product that I'm gonna use a lot, and then a couple months later, am I using it a lot? And if I'm not, why not? With that in mind, I'm thinking about breaking down maybe the end of read review into some different categories to help us nail down some of the aspects that I think are important. The thing that I really want to aim for is a statement at the end of whether I can say a product, a piece of content, is good value for money. How do we decide what is good value for money? The obvious thing to do would be to compare it to other bits of content in the tabletop role-playing game space, but actually I think this is really bad. And the reason why I think it's really bad is because I think that the marketplace is essentially all screwy with tabletop role-playing games. Folks will offer huge tomes of things for free. Other folks will offer things that are very slim for a good deal of money, and all kinds of things in between. I don't think I have a really good sense, and I'm not even sure that creators have a really good sense of what the actual market or value of something is. It's not as as simple, I don't think, as you might find in other fields or in other industries. And I'm talking particularly with the independent creator work and especially with digital work. Once you start factoring in print runs and print costs and all that jazz, then things start to get into a much more even playing field. With digital only works, especially from independent creators, suggesting that someone needs to price their piece of content next to someone else's, I don't think works. People put out content for all kinds of reasons and all kinds of price points for all kinds of reasons, and it's hard to boil all those down and say, because this person's charging $3 for X and this person's charging $6 for Y, or they're charging 99 cents for Z, or this person's giving around A for free. I don't think that works. What I've decided to do is judge the value for money based on my local bodega's pricing. And with that in mind, I went the other day when I bought lunch at said bodega, I took a snapshot of their menu, and here it is. Come on, come on. There you go. On this menu, you can see prices for things. So these are New York, Brooklyn pricing. Your prices may vary, but I think this is a good way to look at things. When I was talking about OFR the other day, I mentioned, is it worth a cup of coffee? Well, it's actually, my bodega's coffee is a little bit cheaper, and it was on a separate screen, so I didn't get a picture of that. But here we might take something that's $3.50 and compare it to the price of a bagel with cream cheese or peanut butter and jelly or some other little sandwich breakfast item, and we could think about, hey, is this worth this everyday item? And that, I think, gives a good baseline. Now, of course, your local prices are bound to vary very much from mine, but this is, I think, a good starting point. So I can have a little bit of a scale as, hey, is it worth a bagel, a plain bagel? Is it worth a egg and cheese sandwich or something else from the menu? Is it worth cream cheese with your bagel? In terms of how are we gonna break down this value for money? I think some categories are in order. These are in flux, may change. Let me know when I read through these if they resonate with you, if there's some category I'm missing, if I'm thinking about something completely wrong. I really am trying to open up this dialogue of how I can better serve you with these reads that I do, improve them as a resource when folks are looking at things they want to spend their hard-earned money on. Now, I will say that because I give these kind of really broad read-throughs, I think you do get a really good idea at the book. And at the end of an hour or however long it takes me to go through one of these things, you'll have seen a great deal of the book in some kind of depth. And I think that does give you a pretty good idea of, does this piece of product work for me? Is it worth the money that it's asking? Yes or no. However, that said, a lot of folks don't want to go through these streams. Maybe this will help me develop some more capsule type reviews, which I did for a little bit and then I kind of fell out of doing them, and this may be a little bit of a way of me working them back in. Anyhow, on to the categories. One is novelty. By novelty, I don't mean it has to be new. There's very little new under the sun. I think we see a lot of repetitions of different mechanics, which is fine. The tried and true stuff works. There are lots of great ideas people come up with. They work, reuse them. Take a good idea, riff on it. What I mean by novelty is really looking at, does these rules, does this combination of mechanics offer anything new that we could find already? Not to say that it has to do this, but I think when I'm looking at a product, if I want to recommend somebody, hey, this is good, if you already have basically the same thing, I think it's maybe not as valuable as if it's giving a new combination. Is it taking from the greater category of mechanics, rules, thought, philosophies that have been floating around the internet? Does it create a really interesting new dish end result out of this? I also want to make a note that novelty or newness, it's also really hard. A lot of folks will look at something and say, hey, it's just a collection of blog posts or blog content or stuff that's been innovated elsewhere. And while I agree with that to some degree, we have to remember that blog posts are scattered all over the place. Not everybody sees everything. And there is some value to someone who has found these great bits of gold and put them together. Now, if I had my druthers of my way, I would wish and hope that folks would footnote where they're getting things and give credit where credit is due. If you're using usage dice, credit the Black Hat, because the Black Hat came up with them. If you found something on someone's blog, credit the blog. But I also think that there's just so much, nobody sees everything, and we may feel like in the little bubble on the internet where we're reading so much stuff that everybody knows everything and they could just put together their own little set of rules from blog posts, but they're so scattered and disorganized. There is value, I think, in somebody taking on that role of compiler, I guess, compiling all these different blog posts, finding the ones that really work together, putting them into something and designing and creating a piece of content that really brings the best out of those out. There is value there. That's novelty. Now, completeness. Is this thing complete? Now, the review or the comment that I read earlier mentioned that they felt like rules-lite games were basically incomplete by their very nature, requiring you to have background in rules and then you fill in. And that may be true for some of them, but this is a question we can ask. Just because it's rules-lite, I think by its nature, rules-lite is going to have gaps. That's part of the lightness. But is it giving us everything we need to play the game? Could I take this book, whatever it is, this rules-lite set of rules, mechanics, and if it says, hey, this is a complete role-playing game, can we play a role-playing game with just this book? I'm really going to look at what do the authors say about it themselves. If they say this is a toolkit for doing something, then it's going to be important if it's a complete toolkit. If you're telling me this is a toolkit for running wilderness adventures, then we can judge it on, is it giving us everything we need to run wilderness adventures? It's not saying it's going to be covering everything. It's saying it's specifically for wilderness adventures. So that's when to look. If this says, hey, this is a complete role-playing game, then that's how I'm going to judge it. How well does it do all the things that it says on the tin or in the intro or on the product description that it's going to do? Utility, what is it actually offering? And then that's going to feed into completeness, is going to feed into novelty, but ultimately, well, what are you giving us? Is this something that we need? This is going to be highly personal. Some folks would love a whole book on what to do when you're camping out in the wilderness. Other folks are going to say this is not worth my time. All of these are very much in the eyes of the beholder and in your miles may vary territory, but how useful is this piece of content that we're looking at? And then design, it is important. I'm not someone who puts a high mark of importance on expensive art or things like that, but you want to look at, is the design in a way that helps with usability? Is it nice to look at? It doesn't have to be fancy. If you're picking choices for fonts or your layout or your graphics that make things harder to read or are not clear or are just really clunky, then that does affect how you're going to use it at the table. Now, my focus is going to be usability overall and then beauty underneath it. Of course, beauty's nice if you can have it. And of course, if you design it in a way that really enhances that utility, I want to definitely reward those sorts of efforts. Those are our categories: novelty, completeness, utility, design. Am I missing something? Is there something that we need that I'm not showing? Do I have too many categories? Should two of these be one category? You let me know. But hopefully we'll be able to, and I don't know if I'm going to score these necessarily, stars out of 5. I'm not sure. I don't really love that so much. Maybe even just a thumbs up, thumbs down, or just talking about it. Ideally, we'll take these categories, we'll discuss them, and then we can bottom line and say, okay, we've gone through all of that, and in the end, using the aforementioned bodega scale, what is the value for money? Is this worth a bagel with cream cheese? Now, if you're not in a place with good bagels, maybe that bagel with cream cheese is worth a lot. Will this help us? Will this help you? Will it help me? You let me know. Until then, game on, and I'll talk to you later.